Hello everyone, StealthyShiroean here, and today I'm bringing you my review of Pumpkin Jack. Pumpkin Jack was developed by Nicolas Moissonnier and published by Head Up Games, releasing in October 2020. For any Humble Choice subscribers, you would have received this game in the June 2022 bundle. Pumpkin Jack is a short, spooky action-adventure platformer, following in the veins of older 3D platformers of the late 90s and early 2000s. And while most of the game was developed by one person, it holds up surprisingly well. The presentation of the game in the graphics departments brings with it a very colorful look that invokes a creepy Halloween aesthetic. Everything here tends to lean more on a lighthearted, cartoony look rather than something horrific and unsettling. The game uses a lot of fog and great lighting to make all these areas really pop, with each one being visually distinct from the other. I thought the style was done really well and is great for someone who wants something Halloween flavored but doesn't want to deal with the horror elements. There were a couple of graphical hiccups though that I did encounter and I thought were worth mentioning in case anyone has a similar issue. First, VSync doesn't always work and there can be noticeable screen tearing. This can be fixed by switching from borderless mode to full screen or vice versa. The second issue was the use of high dynamic range, or HDR, with DirectX 12. It makes everything oversaturated, making it really hard to see some things. From a post in the Steam discussions of the game, the creator states this wasn't the intended look, so it seems that this should only be enabled if you're running the game in DirectX 11. The music here follows a similar approach to the aesthetics with its very generic Halloween sounding songs, and that's not a bad thing. As with the graphics, the music elevates the feel of the game with its ethereal sounding soundtrack, making especially great use of the xylophone and theremin. Or what I assumed are being used. The story is probably the game's single greatest fault. It's fairly simple and nothing really special. The world is in a state of peace and prosperity, and the devil really doesn't like this, so he creates a curse that brings about monsters in the world. Humans resist this curse by fighting back, and they employ the help of a great wizard to be their champion. The devil finds this annoying and sends his own champion, Stingy Jack, to put an end to the wizard and bring an end to the world. I thought the cutscenes in the game were largely redundant, as they usually just summarize what the player just got done doing and were fairly minimalistic. There's also attempts at humor in the game, especially humor that breaks the fourth wall, and yeah, let's just say I wouldn't be telling anyone to quit their day job. Don't expect any sort of real extensive narrative. That's not really the focus of the game here, as there's not much to go on. The largely perfunctory story serves as a way to facilitate the game from area to area. The ending seemed like it was setting up for a possible sequel, but if there will be one, that remains to be seen. Pumpkin Jack brings some fun platforming and action combat, even if everything feels fairly simple. However, with only 6 levels in the game, I could understand why this was the case. Starting with the platforming, I actually liked it a lot. I'm not usually a fan of platformers, especially 3D platformers, but I thought Pumpkin Jack did it really well. Although that's probably because nothing about the platforming was particularly challenging, which may be a turnoff for some who like that level of precision jumping some of these games have. Each level has a bunch of collectibles to find, with many of them being easily noticeable. However, there were some that required a bit of exploration of the map. It was usually these that offered slightly more challenging jumping puzzles, but again, they weren't that challenging. Actually, the game's difficulty is non-existent throughout most of the game. The combat is fairly simple. You have an attack, a dodge, and a ranged attack from your crow, with some slightly different combination attacks depending on how you string your key presses together. And there's a variety of weapons, which is cool, but also unnecessary. There were 6 different weapons, and I felt that once I started to get used to one, they gave you a new one. Supposedly the Steam page suggests that you need to swap your weapons to use against different foes, but I didn't notice that this was the case. Personally, I would have rather seen maybe half the amount of available weapons, but more well thought out combos, distinct playstyles to each weapon, and doubling down on the enemies that could be strong or weak against certain weapons. I felt the only time the game got difficult was with a couple bosses. The door boss, this guy, In particular was annoying because of the environment getting in the way of the camera during one particular attack he would do. And the second time was with the final boss, but that difficulty wasn't that much of a spike. There were some instances where I needed to be more careful with the mob fight, but health is overly abundant as it exists in all the breakables. I thought it was funny how each checkpoint offered a healing potion, but it was usually never needed. Pumpkin Jack also features some minigames that are in the form of travel sections and parts where you control only Jack's head. The travel sections all have their own levels of enjoyment. When the game first introduced it with the minecarts, I thought it was a fun little aside, but then realized that every level after had their own version of this. After the first time, it didn't quite feel as fun, especially with the gargoyle and go-kart travel sections, just because the controls felt awkward and turning was difficult to get out of the way of obstacles. The other mini-games also started off with a strong first impression, but got to be a bit monotonous after that. The first couple suggested that these segments would be platforming puzzles where you need to use the pumpkin's head to open up areas for Jack's corporeal body. However, most of them ended up being some form of memory or matching game. All of these were fine as a minigame, but they all seemed like they didn't really match the gameplay or complement it in any way. I'm wondering if these segments were a result of a compromised scope so the solo developer could actually finish their game. And that brings us to the value of the game. Pumpkin Jack goes for $29.99 USD at normal retail price, and I clocked my playthrough at about 6 hours in total, which is a bit longer than what How Long to Beat states. Overall, I enjoyed my time with the game, but for $30, I just can't recommend it at that price. The playtime is too short for what's here, and the extra filler content with the minigames just didn't grab my attention. Some more time put into the combat and platforming elements would have done wonders for this game. That being said, I think getting this on a good sale, probably 60% off or more, would make this a worthwhile addition to a library if you were a fan of this genre. That said, there's nothing wrong with going out of your way to support solo indie if that's what you like doing, but just know what you're purchasing before you do. And those are my thoughts on Pumpkin Jack. If you played the game, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you haven't, then let me know if it sounds like something you'd be interested in or if you have any other questions. I hope this video helped you in some small way, and if it did, then please consider leaving a like, comment, subscribe, or whatever it is you feel like doing. Thanks for watching, and have a nice day.